Hi, welcome to the Legislators Lounge. I'm Jim Webb, the host of the show, and my co-host is Brian Chiricello. Today with us, we have a candidate for U.S. Senate, Dan Innis, who's also District 1.
Right. Actually, you're a candidate for Congress.
Congress.
Here, yep,
Congress.
Here in District 1.
Sorry about that.
Yeah.
Welcome, Dan.
Well,
Welcome,
thank
Dan.
you. It's good to be here. I appreciate it.
We appreciate you stopping by. Why don't we start the show with maybe you give us some background about yourself so the viewers know a little bit about you.
Sure. You know, I'm certainly coming into this race as a different kind of candidate. And if you look at my recent past, you sort of see that. I was the Dean of the Business School at the University of New Hampshire, did that for 6.5 years, where we built a brand new building with no new state money. We did it with private support and reserves that were built up. $30 million budget responsibility there, and I always returned a surplus to the university. I also own a business in Portsmouth. It's a 32-room hotel, just opened about a week and a half ago, the Hotel Portsmouth. Previously had the Ale House Inn, which was a 10-room place, also in Portsmouth. So I'm coming into this race not as a politician, but as someone who's built a career in education and in business and knows how to get things done. I'm originally from Ohio, grew up in I say a poor household. My dad didn't like it when I said that. I saw him a couple of weeks ago. But it's true, but it was a very loving family, a great childhood, terrific values. All of my family was close by, and I got to know my grandparents, great-grandparents, and really had a terrific childhood. First in my family to go to college, paid my own way, scholarships, Pell Grant, student loans, paid off the last loan when I was 38 years old, and had accepted my first dean's job at that point. So, and you know, I'm someone who believes firmly in live free or die. I think that business is important to our economy. I think business creates jobs, not government. And I'm happy to have the opportunity to take my message out to the folks in New Hampshire and to make the case.
Great.
That's great. Glad that you could make a show. And I have a question for you. You had just mentioned that you believe in the live free or die. And we're pretty much asking all the candidates the same thing. So I'm going to ask you this up front because you said that.
All right.
What do you think of the Second Amendment?
Well, there's not much to think about it. I support the Second Amendment, period. And that's my position. Always has been.
Okay. Now, meaning you support it, would you prompt any changes to our current rules?
No changes.
Okay.
No, I think we're in the right place.
All right, I'm going to switch it up and ask you a question about business because I think that's the driving force of the economy.
Yep.
I was listening to a radio station this morning saying that the economy's, they're thinking it's slowing down, especially in housing. So I want to get your thoughts on what we can do,
right?
Not only as a state but as a country to get good paying jobs.
Right. The biggest problem that business has right now, I mean, look, we've been we went through a very deep recession, and we've had a very weak recovery. The country's been very slow to pull out of it, and people ask why. You know, why is it that this recovery's been so much slower and so different from the last, any number of recoveries, actually? And the big reason is that there's still uncertainty. And business doesn't like uncertainty. Right. And it's like your personal life. If you're uncertain about your future, you save more money, you're much more cautious in your decision making, and you won't invest in the way that you would if you feel very confident about where you are. Business is the same way. They don't know really still what's in this healthcare law, what will it cost my business, when's it even going to go into effect. Don't know that. The fiscal situation in D.C. has businesses concerned. Now, the threat of shutdowns gets business concerned. And all of that feeds the uncertainty about our future. And then there are other things that impact business, and one is the corporate tax rate. We have one of the highest corporate tax rates in the world, and that incents business to keep their money elsewhere, overseas in places where there are lower tax rates. Europe is taxed at a lower rate. Most of Asia is at a lower rate. And we're telling business, don't bring your money back to America. Right. And if it's not in America, they won't be investing it in America. So we've got to change those things. We've got to bring some certainty to the equation. We've got to ideally get rid of Obamacare, but at a minimum, we need to define it and help businesses understand it, and I believe chip away at it and change it if we can't ultimately get rid of it. And we've got to get the fiscal situation in D.C. under control.
Right.
Add to that a fix to the corporate tax, I think we'd be in a very different place.
Now, did you read?
I left out regulation as well. That's
okay.
another big one.
Yes.
And we've seen dramatic increases in regulation since 2008. It's not slowing down. In fact, it's getting worse. We have a president that's issuing executive orders that are further constraining business. And every regulation has a cost to it. You may not see it immediately, but there's a cost. And when you have banks and companies starting to build compliance departments, well, that's a department that has people in it just to comply with all the regulations. There's a cost,
right.
And ultimately that cost is borne by us.
Right. Now, speaking of the corporate tax rate, did you see it was, I forget the article, but it was Walgreens.
Yeah.
Where the stockholders had went to Walgreens and said, we want you to relocate your headquarters out of the United States and into Europe.
Yeah.
Because the corporate tax rate is so high.
Yeah. And you know, that feels un-American, right? And it is in a sense, but you know, you also understand it a little bit. I mean, the goal of a company is to make money, and ideally we want companies to make money and to reinvest in our country. But when we have policies and regulations that discourage that, right. You know, we see this kind of behavior. So we've got to change the equation. We've got to change the way we're thinking about businesses. Right now, much of Washington, D.C., and I would argue just about all of the Democratic Party, views business as evil. Profit is a dirty word. Oh, come on. I mean, profit is a good word, and when companies are profitable, they're creating good jobs, and Americans are doing better. So to me, business is a big part of the answer. Yeah. It's not part of the problem.
You had mentioned that you just opened this new hotel and it 38 rooms. I imagine you employ quite a few employees.
Yeah, we do.
Now, has Obamacare affected you to the point where you don't go to that 50th employee?
Well, we won't get to 50 with just 32 rooms. We'll also have eventually, we'll open, I hope in the next month or so, a beer and wine bar downstairs with a little bit of food service. But we won't get to 50, so it really won't impact us. But it would be something I'd think about. One thing I have noticed, you know, we did the first back in 2008. And it was tough to do. Got an SBA loan, a Small Business Administration loan. Don't let me forget to tell you a little story with that. Okay. It's a problem with the way government does things. But, you know, it wasn't too bad. When we did it this time, and we just bought this place in November, the rules have changed. You know, Dodd-Frank was passed. The requirements on banks are much steeper. The exponential increase in paperwork and things that we had to do to make this one work blew my mind. And I've heard business owners say, and some of these are big businesses, if I had it to do over today with the restrictions that are in place now, I'm not sure I would. That is the worst message we could ever hear in America. When you have business people questioning why they're still doing this, there's a real problem, and it's a big problem. Yeah. So the SBA loan. Yes. We got an SBA loan to buy the first place, and I was thrilled that the program was there. It really enabled us to get it done. So we sold that one to buy the larger one, and in that process, you pay off the SBA loan. Well, we were paying it off 6 years early. Now, one would think that the SBA would say, hey, this is really great. We're getting some money back. We can lend it out to new businesses, help them grow. No. We had to pay a penalty of 1% a year for each year we paid it off early. So 6% penalty for paying the loan off early. Now,
is that
unbelievable.
Because they're not getting the interest over the 6 years? I'm presuming that.
I don't know what they're thinking, honestly. I mean, you know, they got the interest for 4.5 years. Yeah. They get their money back. They should be thrilled to have it available to help more businesses.
That's true.
Instead, they penalize us.
It's kind of like the FHA. They want you to stay in it for a year.
Yeah.
You know, that
well, a
kind
year
of
is
thing,
one thing, but, you know, we were in multiple years. And, you know, what they're trying to avoid is flipping it, right? But come on. It's a 10-year cycle on that stuff. And that's an example of a well-intentioned government program that's going a little bit wrong.
It doesn't
maybe
make sense.
A lot wrong.
Right.
It doesn't make sense.
So Dan, you've been out campaigning for a while. I'd like to hear from your opinion as to what the residents of the Granite State. What's their main concerns? What are you hearing?
Well, the number one concern seems to be economy and jobs. I mean, that is the thing that's on everybody's mind. And I frequently get questions in that area. The other thing is Obamacare. Now, there's a general distaste for it in New Hampshire, if not an outright dislike. And you hear that. I mean, that's one that runs across party lines for the most part. So that's a big one that's out there. Another big one is just government intruding in our lives, whether it's regulation or whether it's spying or something else. You know, that's another big concern that people have. Yeah. And you know, when you've got someone like Rand Paul giving a talk at the University of California, Berkeley, and when he talks about the NSA, he gets a standing ovation at probably the most liberal university in the country. Yeah. That says something about how young people are starting to feel and how the rest of us are starting to feel. I mean, the crush of government, whether it's spying or regulation or taxes, is really starting to get to people. And that's an undercurrent everywhere I go.
What would you do to bring business back into this country? What would do you have a plan?
Well,
do you have any ideas?
Well, there are a lot of things that we can do. I mean, and it's some of the things that we've already hit on. One is the corporate tax rate. Let's fix that corporate tax rate, because America can be competitive. It can be competitive in manufacturing. But when you're taxed at a much lower rate for your overseas activity than you are at home, there's an added incentive to put it overseas. Let's get rid of that, and let's create incentives here and create an environment that causes businesses to want to invest and reinvest in America. And I think many of them want to, but they also have to be rational in the way they run their businesses. It's a competitive environment. So that's certainly one thing. Again, I think solving the problems in D.C., getting a real long-term budget fix is important. And we need a 5 to 10 year plan, sort of a blueprint for the budget that will take us forward, that Congress has to stick to. And we need to force Congress to vote on every spending increase, none of this pre-programmed stuff that they like to put into budgets, and start to bring some clarity there. I think if we do that, if we can reduce some of this regulatory burden and get things moving again, we'll create those jobs.
Yeah. Have you heard what they're doing in New York State? I watched a commercial where they're giving tax breaks for up to 10 years to bring manufacturing jobs back in.
Yeah.
I thought that was interesting. I don't know the details on it. But
yeah, well, they want you to go to upstate, which has had a lot of economic struggles for some time. And I understand what they're trying to do, but New York is a state that has enormous regulatory burden. And while that tax reduction will probably be helpful, I'm not sure how successful they'll be because of the other issues they have. Right. They do have decent infrastructure in much of upstate, and you know, New York's thoughtful about that. But I'm not sure it'll be enough. I mean, I'm thinking, but it's a good idea.
Outside of the box, they're thinking outside of the box.
They are.
They know that there's there's limited amounts of businesses, so why not try to attract them? I thought
absolutely,
it was,
and I think that makes sense. And you see states do that from time to time. They're being pretty aggressive, and they're advertising it. I mean, you see it on TV, and I think it's smart.
And Cuomo's getting a lot of slack over there by his own
party. Yeah.
Well, New Hampshire has one of the largest regulatory things. What is it? We have more licensing, different licensing. What was it last year? They brought up 270
regulations,
different people that would have to register to do business, electricians, beauticians, you name it.
Yes.
I mean, right down the line, New Hampshire's #1.
Well, and it's a tricky way to generate revenue, right? Yes. I mean, that's why it's being done, and that's not the reason to do it. You do it to maybe protect customers. So should you have a license to hold scissors by somebody's head? Probably. Do you need a license to do, you know, other things that are much more mundane? Probably not. You know, government has to avoid doing things to raise money. Government is not a business. It is not government's job to grow every year. It's not government's job to increase its revenue every year. It's government's job to provide basic services that people want and need, and nothing more. And government has become almost a business in America. And the questions become, how do we get more money into Concord or into Columbus or into Albany? And that's the wrong question to ask. Yeah. Absolutely the wrong question. So when states start thinking about casinos or legalizing pot, and part of the conversation is think how much money it'll bring in, that's the wrong conversation to have. Do those things stand up on their own merit? That's the discussion. And if you happen to get some money out of that, all right. But that's not the reason to do it. Right. Government is not in the business of growing. But right now it is.
Yeah. Let's change it up and talk about foreign policy. We're seeing in the news with Putin and what he's doing.
Do we have one right now? I'm
don't know.
not sure.
I'm not sure
we do.
I really do want to get your thoughts on
a lot of lines
that.
that don't mean anything.
Well, we do. Yeah.
So what's your thoughts on Ukraine and Syria? And I'd like to.
Well, you know, as I said, sort of jokingly, we don't really have a foreign policy right now. Our foreign policy, since the president took office, first we started by apologizing for things that, well, I don't think America should ever apologize. We are the greatest country in the world, bar none. How many people have we liberated over the years with our military, and we haven't taken an acre of land, right? We are good in the world, and I absolutely believe that 100%. But he has not had a foreign policy other than to say we're sorry for something. And every time a crisis comes up, he treats it as if it's never happened before and we don't know how to do it. Well, the problem is that he doesn't have a foreign policy based on a core set of values that he holds and that America holds. And the successful presidents, the successful secretaries of state, have foreign policies that are built on a core set of values. And you know, if you're Putin, if you take action A, you know what the United States reaction will be. And if you take action B, you can predict what the United States reaction will be. Right now, that's not the case. No. So you just push it a little bit, see what happens, probably not much, and then you push it a little bit more. I mean, if Putin goes into the Ukraine, what will we do? I don't know. But I can tell you, when George W. Bush was president, if Putin went into the Ukraine, you knew what would happen. And he didn't go into the Ukraine, he didn't go into Crimea, he didn't do all the things he's doing now. Right. Because we had a core set of values and beliefs, and everyone knew what those were, friends and enemies alike.
There's only so many sanctions you can do, and then it doesn't mean anything.
Yeah,
and I think that's what we're down to it now when it comes to foreign policy.
We are. I mean, Biden said, I think yesterday, that, you know, if Putin does this, there'll be severe consequences or something to that effect.
What do you think of Benghazi? I mean,
well, there is certainly a smoking gun there. I don't know that. I hope we'll learn what happened and that it will see the light of day. I'm not sure. I do believe that if Hillary decides to run for president, Benghazi will haunt her for some time. It does seem that it was a failure on our part to protect our people, and that in itself is inexcusable.
I seen something today, as a matter of fact, where they were kind of pushing it off, saying it won't matter because people really don't care.
People will care, especially when they understand what really happened. Yeah. People are dead, and that
didn't need to be dead.
That's right. That's right.
Let's go back to the NSA, the spying. You know, I mean, the government after 9/11 got super sensitive to the fact that we need to find out what's going on before. To find a terrorist before they can strike. So there's a fine balance between spying and spying on average American citizens. So
that's right.
Has it gotten out of hand?
Oh, I think it has. And look, government and people have a tendency to overcorrect when something happens. And I think that's what happened after 9/11. We were all enormously disturbed by it. And you become fearful. And in that process, you start taking action to protect yourself. And I understand why we did it, but we probably went too far. When the government has the ability to search your email, cell phone records without just cause, I mean, that's inexcusable. Would you let them into your home without just cause? No. You need a search warrant. They can search your personal records without a search warrant, a violation of the Fourth Amendment. No. No, and we overcorrected. So I feel we've got to address this, and we've got to push some of that stuff back.
Right.
If there is just cause, if they believe I'm a terrorist, okay, you know, then perhaps you should be able to search my records.
But have a warrant.
Yeah, but,
right.
Or they should maybe watch it for a little while, or just you know, but to carte blanche, where all Americans are being watched. Every single phone call is being recorded. That's the point where they've gone a little bit too far.
More than a little bit too far. They've gone way too far.
And I think the sad part is the younger generation is really, what's the right word? You know, they see what's going on, and they have a major distrust with government. There's a detach, and that's tough.
Right. There's an absolute distrust of government, and it carries through to everything. I mean, with Obamacare, young people don't want to be told they have to buy health insurance. Right? And my son, and I've told this story out on the campaign trail, asked me a year ago, Dad, how can they force me to buy health insurance? So I explained it, and he said, no, how can they do that? And I said, well, they're going to. Well, I'm not buying it. Well, then you'll pay a fine. Well, I still don't want to buy it. I'll pay the fine. And that captures who these young people are today. And they don't trust government. They don't believe that government has all the answers, and they'd like to see less of it.
Right.
And I think the Republican Party's got a good message there. And if we're smart, we can capture these folks.
Right.
The folks that, in 2008 voted for Obama in lockstep.
Right.
We can stop that.
Speaking on that line with the people not liking what's happening, and then I see this thing on the news about this guy out in Nevada with his cattle.
Yeah.
What do you think about that one with the government actually?
Well, I will say I don't know all the details with that one. He's had some difficulties with the government over the years. It may be some government overreach, but there may be some other issues there too. So I'm not jumping into that one.
Well, I'm the only reason why I mentioned it is not so much that his problem and the government's problem, but it seems to be a lot of other people getting involved right now that want to be involved.
Yeah, well, this thing is sort of symbolic of government control. And I think that's what we're seeing is people are so fed up with government control and government restraints that they see this as an opportunity to visibly fight back. Exactly. And I think that's what's happening.
Yeah. That's why I
look whether he's right or wrong, I don't know. I've never been a rancher. I don't know the rules. But it certainly is drawing attention to what I think is a real problem, and that's government overreach.
Let's jump into energy. What kind of energy policy should the United States be looking for?
I think we've got to have a balanced approach to energy. And right now we've got an assault on certain sectors of energy, and that doesn't make sense to me. We've got to be thoughtful in how we approach energy. We need to be as clean as we can possibly be. That's in everybody's best interest. And we need to be as efficient as we can possibly be. Again, that's in everyone's best interest. But you've got to let market forces play, and that's the best way to approach it. I believe in clean coal. I think it can be done responsibly. We've seen evidence of that. I think natural gas makes a lot of sense. I think where we can extract oil and natural gas from the ground responsibly and safely, as we're seeing in the Bakken region in North Dakota, I think that makes sense. We need to be as independent as we can be. But I don't like the government stepping in and picking winners or losers.
Right.
There's a war on coal. There seems to be a little bit of a war on the Bakken. The Keystone Pipeline is being held up, right? And that's pure politics.
Solyndra.
Yeah, well, then that's right. And when the government tries again to pick winners and losers, and they start throwing money at things, it usually doesn't work out. Government's really not very good at understanding these things. So let's let the market do it. And if individual states want to go in another direction, that's their decision. If Vermont decides, well, we want to shut down our last nuclear plant and we want to, make everyone use solar, okay, Vermont, you go do that. But I don't think that makes sense nationwide, and we've got to be balanced.
That is a big issue as far as the states' rights. What do you think of states' rights versus federal rights?
That's the basis for our nation, right, is states' rights and state governance. And I believe that's the best way to go. Federal government should be as small as it can possibly be, and the states should chart their own course. We're all different.
I don't know how many times we'll be up with some sort of bill in front of the State House, and next thing we know, well, we can't do that because the feds won't let us.
Yeah.
So I always thought the states had their sovereign right to.
They used to. They used to, and those seem to be getting diminished. And Washington's clever because they will tell you don't have to do this, but we won't give you the money if you don't. Right? And that's a tricky technique they have. The power of the purse it's very powerful.
Going back to business, and when we went through the bad recession and the economy was bad, what do you think of the federal government with the stimulus money that they pumped into the?
Yeah, it's sort of It is one approach to jump-starting an economy, pumping money into it and trying to create projects that will employ people. And it does have an impact, and it can be positive. This last one, though, wasn't very well done. You know, the president threw money at shovel-ready projects, whether they made any sense or not.
Right.
And the way to do that sort of thing, if you must, is to direct that money in a strategic fashion. Did we need to invest in infrastructure? Yes. Do we need to invest in infrastructure? Yes. But did we need to just throw money at projects? No. That's the wrong way to do it, and I think that's why the stimulus program wasn't as successful as it might have been.
Yeah.
It wasn't truly an investment in our future.
Like, for instance, the bridge to nowhere in Hillsborough.
That's
right, where we could have used that bridge on the Sarah Long Bridge, could have used that money.
Yes, perfect example. Yeah, we need to think strategically, and strategically, it should have been Memorial Bridge, Sarah Mildred Long, and that sort of thing. And again, it's a case of Washington trying to make decisions for us when they don't know what we need.
Now, I actually had the pleasure of going on that tour that went over to the naval base and,
Yeah.
and the need for the bridge and all that.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, the federal government is involved in this, whereas they have to do it a specific way, including a bike path. To me, that's kind of a waste of $5 million. I mean, but then again, you know, the way they explained it was, if we don't do it, we don't get the federal money. So,
well, and there you are again, right? It's Washington putting a restriction in place and tying money to it. You don't have to do it, but you won't get as much money.
Yeah.
Right? So you're essentially forced into doing it. And again, it's some federal overreach there, which we see all the time now. I'd like to see that sort of thing turned back as much as we can.
Yeah, let me talk about the cuts in the military and what your thoughts are on that.
Well, you know, we're talking about cutting the military at a time when Russia is agitating again, right?
Right.
To me, that probably doesn't make a lot of sense. I do think you've got to take a look at everything government does all the time and try to find opportunities to be more efficient while not reducing, in the case of the military, its effectiveness. So there may be opportunity to do some things better and smarter, but to walk in and say we're going to do a blanket cut and we're going to cut troops and you know, dial back at a time when the world is looking more hostile doesn't make sense to me. And I believe firmly in our military. It does good in the world. Our men and women in uniform are amazing people, and we all owe them a huge debt of gratitude. And we need to continue to invest in our military in a smart way and be sure that we're prepared for guys like Putin and, you know, countries
Assad.
like Iran.
Yeah.
You know, we've got to be ready for what might happen. And the best way to ensure peace around the world is with a strong America. And I don't want another nation to step up and sort of become the world leader.
Right.
Who would it be? China? Russia?
Right.
Or us? Now you pick the one that's best for the world.
Well,
I think it's
one's
pretty
that's
clear
best,
it's us.
best for us.
Well,
We're looking at our own best interests, but
of course.
I'm sure the Russians and the Chinese are looking at their best interests too. So
They are, but you know, when you look at the leaders of those countries and you look at the history of those nations, I don't think they hold a candle to us.
no, absolutely not.
And I believe that we should be the world leader, and we do that through strength. And it doesn't mean you always apply that strength,
No.
but you have it.
Right. But as we're cutting defense here in the United States, China is actually spending more money.
They're
Right.
building aircraft carriers.
Yeah, and you can bet Russia's going to spend more money too. I mean, you know, they're not dumb. And if the United States continues to let itself be weakened,
Right.
both perceptually and in reality, these countries are going to fill the void.
It's kind of like back in the 80s when Reagan was president, you know. They talked about the
through
same
strength.
thing. And they
Peace
spent the
through
money,
strength.
and it basically broke the backs of the Russians.
It absolutely did. I mean, the communism fell because of Ronald Reagan's investments in the military, among other things.
And the side effect of that was everything we received as far as technology-wise.
Yes.
As a sideline to the military.
That's right. I mean, the technology that comes out of the military often finds its way into our lives on a regular basis, and that's very beneficial. Absolutely.
I have a question for you as far as the education, since you happen to be in the field.
Yep.
Actually, kind of a two-part question. The first part is that New Hampshire students have the highest student loan debt in the
Yes.
country.
They do. My son's among them.
Which makes it more difficult. And what we're finding that our students are actually leaving New Hampshire to get jobs in other parts of the country.
Yeah.
Of course, we're kind of limited. What do you think we can do about that?
Yeah, well, there are actually two parts to that question, I think. And the first one is, students leaving New Hampshire for jobs elsewhere. There are a couple things there. A lot of students that graduate, say, from the University of New Hampshire, I'm most familiar with that, would like to stay in New Hampshire, but can't always find the jobs that match their skill set. So they will go to other places for work. A lot of them do stay. I mean, more than 40% of UNH graduates stay in New Hampshire, and many of the students at UNH come in from out of state and will stay in the state afterwards. So we actually have some brains that come in and stick around. But you've got to have a growing economy that's providing the right types of jobs for graduating students. And when you look at a graduating student, they don't have it, how to put this? Let me come at it another way, get to the same point. We have a lot of small and mid-sized businesses in New Hampshire and some large ones. Large companies are a great place for new college graduates to start. They have good training programs. They can work through a company and develop their skills further at that large company. So a BAE Systems, a Fidelity, a Liberty, and some of those are great places. A small business sometimes struggles with a new graduate because they've still got a little more to learn about doing it on the ground. And they might be a little hesitant to hire someone right out of college. So that can kind of constrain the hiring situation somewhat. So that's certainly a factor. But another one that drives students out of state that people don't think about is that student loan debt. So if I'm graduating, as my son will be, with $40,000 in student loan debt, he's looking at the job landscape, and he's had an offer in Portsmouth, but the salary isn't where he needs it to be because it won't enable him to pay off his loan and live somewhere other than the third floor of my house, which is where he is now, which is great. I have no problem with that, but he wants to get out, I'm sure. So he might take a job in New York or Chicago or some other place that pays a higher salary and helps him get on top of that student loan debt. Absolutely terrible situation for us as a state. So that's a big deal. So we need, again, to reduce that uncertainty that businesses feel, get the economy growing and New Hampshire's economy growing so this stuff can go. I will say at our business, we've hired recent college graduates. We have one who's graduating this spring from UNH, will be with us full time. And there are businesses that do that, but small businesses. But it's, we've got to have a growing economy and growing jobs for that to happen. Now, circling back to education and its cost, we've made a decision in New Hampshire that we will provide modest support to our higher education system. In so doing, you almost necessarily create a relatively high tuition situation, and that's where we are. Now, could you bring tuition costs down? There are some things you can do, and I think UNH is working hard to do that. President Huddleston is trying to do more with online and some creative things in the summer and during January term, and I think all of that makes sense. But you can only go so far with that, right? No one wants to sit in classes of 100 students. Well, that's a way you can drive costs down pretty quickly, and some of those are fine, but when you get up into the higher level courses, you need smaller courses to do the learning, and you need labs and that sort of thing. So it's a tightrope, and it's a balancing act. And I think UNH is a very efficient university and does a good job. I think that's probably true of the community colleges and the other universities in the system. But it is a high cost. On the other hand, there's a high benefit to the community colleges, to the university. And
what do you think of the Common Core program? Which is, let's start right at the bottom there.
Are we done yet? I think we're finished. The Common Core is it's generating a lot of discussion, and I think my concern with the Common Core, well, I have multiple concerns with it, but let's go back to the federal government's involvement in our lives. And since the Department of Education started, K-12 scores have continued to go down. We haven't seen any improvement really. No Child Left Behind didn't work in quite the way we wanted it to. Again, it was government reaching into our local schools and telling us how we should do things. You look at our universities, we have the best higher education system in the world, period. And that system is built on competition because you can select different schools. It's based on performance. We actually reward faculty or not based on their performance. Even in union shops like UNH, there is performance pay. I think that's important. And the universities set their own curriculum. In the business school, we set our own curriculum. There are things we know we have to have in there, but we set it. And we've built the best system in the world. Washington hasn't told us how to do it, though they keep rumbling about doing that. I don't think that Washington or someone else elsewhere in the nation knows what our students in New Hampshire need to learn or how we should be teaching it. I do believe that we've got to have measures of student outcomes, and we've got to be sure that they're learning what they need to learn. But I think that should be left to the states and the localities. And that's my view on Common Core. Now, could a school system or a state decide they want to use it? Sure, but it should be their decision. And my fear with the Common Core is it's going to come with strings attached. And they'll tie some money to it, and if you're using it, you'll get this nice pot of money, and if you're not, you won't. Yeah. And I don't want to see that.
Well, my biggest fear is that it brings New Hampshire students down, whereas we might be at a higher level than another state, and then we have to actually cut back a little bit so they'll be equal to the other state.
Yeah, I don't know if that would happen or not, but under any circumstance, I don't want outsiders telling us how to run our business. Yeah. As a state or in our communities.
Let's talk about illegal immigration.
Okay.
I want to get your thoughts on what do we need to do in this country. It's a hotbed issue.
It is. Yeah. Well, clearly we have to secure the borders, and we haven't done a real good job of that. I'm seeing some efforts to do that, and I think we'll probably get better at that. I'm not a fan of a path to citizenship for people who came here illegally. I think you're rewarding bad behavior, and you're going to encourage more of that bad behavior in the future. On the other hand, the logistics are such that you're not going to be able to send over 10 million people back. So they're here to stay. And the question is, how do you handle that? And I think you set up a program where these folks can stay. We know that they're here. We know almost all of them, right? I mean, many of them came in with visas and overstayed, and we know they're here. So let's get them into our nation, participating in our country, paying taxes, and becoming a part of the fabric of society. And many of them have had children here. I think those folks are citizens, but if you came in illegally, I don't believe you should be able to become a citizen. You broke the law. It's a bad way to start your time in a new country, I think.
Yeah.
Well, most of them came here illegally, so
well,
like you say,
true.
What do we do with the 10 million? And then we have the fact that we need a lot of these people will take jobs that
they do, and the industry that I'm in, hospitality industry, makes heavy use of immigrants, and they're terrific people, and I'm thrilled they want to come to our country and contribute. And I think we need to set up a system that makes it work for people, so they don't have to do it illegally. They can follow the right path and get in here. Yeah. And there's more to it than that. I mean, going back to my university experience, we have a lot of international students at UNH. They're coming in, they're taking a seat, they're learning from us, they're using our resources to become better people, and then we as a nation say, okay, you're done, you gotta go. And they have to leave the country. They can't stay. We've educated them. They're bright people that could contribute to our economy. There was a student last year who desperately wanted to stay in America, but he couldn't figure out how to do it. He was from Sweden at UNH, and just a great guy, but now he's back home in spite of the fact he wants to stay. So it's not just, the illegal immigrants. It's much broader than that.
But the more that we have the people that came here illegally, and if we accept them, then the less we're going to be able to accept on the other end of the people from, like that gentleman from Sweden.
Could be, but again, we need a strategy here in how we're dealing with immigration, and we don't really have one at this point.
Yeah, I agree. I agree to that.
Yeah. Now, should we do an all-encompassing immigration reform bill? I get real nervous when Congress does things all at once. The last thing they did all at once was Obamacare. It's not working out so well yet. So, you know, I think we tackle immigration a few steps at a time.
Yeah.
And we do it in a very thoughtful manner, and we monitor the outcomes, and we keep going in that direction.
Yep. Jim, I think we're winding down, so I'm going to let Dan maybe talk to the public again.
Sure.
Maybe you've got a website that people can get
Absolutely.
if they have more information that they can get from you.
Innisforcongress.com is the website, and if you click on the Perspectives tab, you'll see some information up there in terms of my position on the issues. I think there are 3 up right now. There will be some more coming over the coming months. And certainly I'm a different kind of candidate in this race. I have real business experience. I've signed both sides of the paycheck and continue to do so. I've created jobs and invested in our economy. And I really believe in the people of New Hampshire, the people of America, and our willingness to roll up our sleeves and get things done. We can solve the problems that we have, but we need to send people to Washington who aren't career politicians, people who understand the lives that we all lead every day and aren't thinking about their next election, but are thinking about doing what's right for the people of New Hampshire. And if you send me to Washington, D.C., I commit to you, I will not forget who I'm representing every day that I get up and every night when I go to bed. And I will work hard for the people of New Hampshire and the people of America. We can do this.
Great, thank you. This has been the Legislators Lounge. I'm Jim Webb, the host of the show. Brian Chiricello, our guest. Dan Innis. And then once again, you can find our shows online at www.derrylounge.com. We also have a Facebook page, which is Derry Lounge. No, actually, that's Legislators Lounge on Facebook. And then we also can be found on YouTube under Legislators Lounge. And you can watch this show and all our other shows as well from the YouTube channel. Okay, once again, till next time.